Hello everyone, welcome back. This is part 2, Story of the Unknown Extraordinary Commando Operations, greatest raid of all time. Jeremy Clarkson, this was a request. This is part 2. I'm not going to talk. It ended on a cliffhanger. If this mission is impossible, then that makes it possible. Let's see.
Mountbatten's enthusiasm certainly didn't rub off on the RAF. You can see here in these Operation Chariot minutes that the powers that be requested a force of about 100 aircraft for the diversionary bombing raid in 3 waves. But on the back, Vice Marshal Saunby says, "I don't agree that such a heavy scale of attack is needed. We want about 20 Whitleys, which are bombers, hanging around overhead, dropping an occasional bomb." And he's backed up by one of his advisors, this chap called Willits, who really says that Operation Chariot can whistle for their 100 bombers. He says Bomber Command can provide no more than 35 aircraft without prejudicing their other commitments. You might have thought the Navy would be keen, especially since the operation was designed to neutralise the Tirpitz. But no. The Commander-in-Chief here from Plymouth Command writes, the plan entails the sacrifice of the landing party and endangers 2 valuable ships for a small chance of success. He actually says negligible chance here. And there's another guy writing here who says, I'm not hopeful as regards the result of the impact between the destroyer and the lock gates. I think the lock gates will remain partially intact and the destroyer will look silly. If that happens, much of the proposed plan fails.
So that guy also thinks it's a suicide mission, which is what I'm thinking it is. But as I said at the end of the first one, they've already talked to 3 people that were a part of it. I don't know. I mean, clearly, I don't know.
Eventually, though, the Navy did find one boat. It was called HMS Campbelltown, a clapped-out American World War I destroyer that was on loan to the British. She was not ideal for the job, known for her poor slow-speed manoeuvrability and her large turning circle.
Oh, no.
But these drawbacks didn't dampen the spirits of the Commandos.
I thought we would get away with it, that I would be wounded romantically and a beautiful nurse would look after me in hospital. I was very young.
You're doing all this heavy training and nothing's happening, so very frustrated. So I think when we were finally briefed on the model, I mean, we thought, well, hell, this is going to be something.
We had been trained, both in the dark, blindfolded in the day, in every form of demolition to do with dock demolitions, trains, and anything. So when we heard,
I thought I was going to be wounded romantically and have a nurse look over me. I like that man. I like that man's thinking.
so when we heard that we were going to blow up the dock installations at Saint Nazaire, I suppose really it was a feeling of elation.
At this stage, people were saying, well, what do you think? To me, you see. And I said, it's going to be a piece of cake. We're going to go in there and knock them for 6, because that reflected the optimistic attitude. We were going to go in there, blow up this bloody dock, and we'll be out.
We had volunteered, after all, for danger. And there did seem an off chance that it was impossible, and therefore it would succeed.
They keep saying that it's impossible, so it will succeed. It's crazy thinking. I love it.
As the Commandos prepared on land, the Navy set about the Campbelltown. The old tub would have to sneak past 80 gun emplacements on its way up the Saint Nazaire estuary, so it had to be disguised, and they only had 12 days to do the work. In the end, they removed 2 funnels and sloped the other 2 backwards, so at a glance it looked a bit like a German destroyer. And then there was the problem of turning it into a time bomb. This job was given to a brilliant young naval officer called Lieutenant Nigel Tibbets. He was a shy chap with a stammer who, when his girlfriend announced that she'd become fond of him, replied, "Well, then I suppose we shall have to get married."
Damn.
However, while he was not desperately confident with women, he was a whiz with explosives, one of the best students the Dartmouth Naval College had ever seen. But even he faced difficulties with how you turn a whole ship into a bomb. The first problem he had was deciding where in the ship to place the explosives. Because you see, if you can imagine, this is the gate to the dock and this is the ship. What's going to happen after it hits? I mean, is it just going to end up here, in which case you want the bomb in the front? Or is it going to rear up, in which case you want the bomb sort of in the middle, toward the bottom?
Oh, yeah.
I suppose theoretically it would be possible, if the ship were going fast enough, for it to actually ride right over the top of the gate and end up in the dock itself. I mean, who knew? Day and night, Tibbets struggled with this until he decided on a spot 40 feet back from the prow, low down, next to the keel. Then he had to work out how to set the explosives off. Back then there was no accurate timing device, so he had to use fuses, like this. The idea is that you squeeze the top part here, which breaks a glass capsule on the inside, releasing acid that then slowly burns through a strip of wire. Now, when that snaps, it releases a spring which boings out, setting off the detonator. Now, this was very advanced in 1942, but there were a couple of problems. First of all, it was very susceptible to jolts and shock. You wouldn't, for instance, want to ram some lock gates at 25 miles an hour with one of these on board, because it might go off instantly, killing everyone. It was also very vague. The strength of the acid varied from fuse to fuse, the strength of the wire varied, the tension of the spring varied. Tibbets couldn't say to within an hour when the bomb might actually go off.
Oh my gosh.
Choosing what explosive to use, however, was fairly straightforward. He went for amatol, and to show how big a bang that produces, we've placed a pound of something similar between the front seats of this car.
3, 2, 1, fire in!
That was a pound. Tibbets was going to use 4 1/4 ton.
We both just said that was a pound, and they're going to use 4 1/4 ton, he's about to say.
Still, even if the explosive...
Just so
Fire in!
That was a pound. Tibbets was going to use 4 1/4 tons. Still, even if the explosives and the fuses could be trusted to work properly, and even if they could get across to France without being detected and up the estuary without being blown to smithereens, and even if the Campbelltown could hit the lock gates exactly right and the Commandos could get off and do whatever it is they had to do, they still had a problem. How do they get home again? Because the Navy wouldn't provide a second destroyer, they were instead given 16 of these. Today, this Fairmile ML is a tourist boat taking trippers around Tor Bay, and certainly it's better suited to this than it ever was for Operation Chariot.
They're made of bakelite bonded plywood.
It was a cheap, mass-production boat designed primarily to make the Navy look bigger than it really was.
May God speed all who sail in her.
It certainly wasn't particularly good in the open sea. It tended to roll badly in a swell, which made everyone on board queasy. It's not so bad if it was only used to bring the soldiers home, but this little fleet would also be used to get half the Commandos out to Nazaire as well. So there'd be 15 commandos wedged down here with all their kit. And when they got to the other end, they'd be expected to get out and start fighting immediately.
It's a Jerry.
There wasn't only seasickness to worry about, because while each ship had small guns fore and aft, it didn't have any armour. No, really. All that stood between the German guns and the men down here were, a few planks of wood. And to make matters worse, each boat was fitted with 2 500-gallon long-range fuel tanks, which were completely exposed on the deck. Campbelltown was a bomb on purpose. These things, they were bombs by accident. Honestly, it's hard to think of any vessel less well-suited to the job in hand. Wow. The Commandos were hard men, good fighters. But they'd been picked for their intelligence as well, so they must have known that the chances of getting to Saint-Nazaire were small. The chances of doing the job were microscopic, and the chances of them getting home again on a wooden boat, groaning under the weight of exposed fuel tanks past an alerted enemy, were virtually non-existent. They must have known that Operation Chariot, for the vast majority, was going to be a one-way ticket.
We were all of us told if we wanted to leave a letter for our next of kin or our loved ones, you could do so, and you wrote on the envelope to be posted in the event of my failing to return.
And there was one, Sergeant Bill Gibson, who I knew them all very well indeed. And I remember seeing his face, and I knew he was going to be killed.
My dearest Dad, by the time you get this, I shall be one of the many who have sacrificed their unimportant lives for what little ideals we may have. I can only hope that by laying down my life, the generations to come might in some way remember us and benefit by what we've done. At a time like this, I turn to you, Dad, and God. I hope there will be peace for everyone soon. My love to everyone. I'll remember you. Your loving son, Bill.
I'm glad I'm doing this video then. For the people who didn't make it. I shouldn't say that, because I don't even know if the damn mission actually happens yet. But if it did, don't tell me. Don't go spoiling it for me. If it did and people were lost, then I'm glad I'm doing something like this, because it brings attention to what they did, and it also just reminds people that people like this should be remembered. You know, whether they survived or they didn't make it. They shouldn't just be easily forgotten. They should be remembered by other generations. So, I'm glad I'm doing this. Thank you for the request. I forgot who it was. You've been forgotten in time, but these people should be remembered.
Somehow I thought it's unlucky to write your last letter to your parents.
Oh, it's gotta be sad.
No, my attitude was, I'm coming back.
Yeah, there you go.
2 of men came to me and said, would you take these letters home to our wives if we're killed? And I said, but wait a minute, I'm going with you. Oh, you won't be killed, I said. They were both killed.
The Saint-Nazaire raiders weren't allowed to reveal details of the operation to their loved ones. But for the bomb designer Nigel Tibbets, recently married and the father of a young son, the thought of keeping his wife in the dark was too much. So he told her. And she said afterwards they both sort of knew he wouldn't be coming back.
Oh.
So as the Commandos gathered here in Falmouth in Cornwall, ready to join the Campbelltown and the little boats that were anchored out there in the bay, Lord Mountbatten gathered them all together, and very unusually, he said to them that any man who wanted to step down could walk away without a stain on his character. Not one of them did.
Damn. by that time, you're not doing it. You've trained with these people. They're brothers, brothers in arms. They're family to that point. And if you step away, it's not a stain on your character, they say, but those other people who have trained with you now rely on you, and they're going to feel that, and you're going to feel it too, especially if you find out that mission did succeed, but if there was 100 people, 34 died, and you're going to look at it and think, could I have saved any of them, or would I have been the 35th? And that's going to haunt you. In that situation, you almost can't walk away.
At 2 p.m. on the 26th of March 1942, the Armada set sail with 264 Commandos and 357 Navy personnel on board. That's a total of 621 men.
Wow.
Only 227 would come back.
Oh my gosh.
I had just enough light to read a book that I was reading, and I just concentrated on reading this book. The thought that crosses your mind is, I hope I'm going to be able to do my part, without being overcome by fear.
We chatted to each other about what we're going to do, and we all went through it with our blokes, I and my 4 guys just went through what we were going to do. I certainly thought to myself, my God, I hope I'm not going to show fear in front of my men if I'm frightened.
Tense, I suppose, would be the thing. Anticipation, yes. Fortunately, I think we were more worried about it being rough, because it's very, as you can imagine, physically exhausting to be seasick all the time. But we were lucky, it was calm.
33 hours later, they arrived at the mouth of the estuary, and the captain of the Campbelltown, Lieutenant Commander Sam Beatty, instructed Tibbets to set the fuses on his bomb. He then began to creep up the estuary. Ideally, he'd have stuck to the deep water channel, the channel the Tirpitz would have used. But this would have meant hugging the northern shore right under the noses of the German sentries. So he had to go right down the middle, despite the fact that the water, even at high tide, was just 10 feet deep.
Wow.
To reduce the ship's draft, much of the heavy armor and the big guns had been removed. So if she did become grounded, she'd be a sitting duck.
We did go across sandbanks a couple of times and dragged a bit going over. But it was so quick that you hadn't got time to think, good God, if I'm marooned here, I'd be shot to pieces.
We're going to stop it here. They just went over this. I can't believe that. But it was so quick to go over the sandbars. No. Time stops when that's happening. Wow. So 200 returned of the 600. So 2 and 6. So 1 in 3. Am I doing that correctly? 1 in 300. So that would be 200. Yeah, so 1 in 3 returned. Wow. 33%. But like I say, it sounded like a suicide mission, but they accepted it, and they knew it. And they knew what it was for. Wow. Well, I'm going to stop this here, and I'm going to jump back into part 3. Yeah. Forgot where I was. So, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and have a good day, have a good night.